Okay, so as it says in the image, we are gonna do Inazuma 11 season 2 top 20 inverse fighting wise. So no football characteristics involved, such as dribbling and defense, purely physical stats and some SCD categories relevant to the fight, such as overall intelligence, in this context, but in stuff like battle IQ, tactical awareness, stuff like that. But mostly focused on physical stats such as physical strength, all types of speed such as movement, travel speed, reaction combat speed, and abilities, which in this case would be Hasatsu's overall AP, durability, stuff like that. So I guess we can start from the bottom. Do you want to name your pick first, or do you want me to do it?
I can name my top 20, then you can name yours,
All right,
and then
bet.
we can just like argue.
Yeah, sure.
So top 20, I've got the goalkeeper from Gemini Storm, who's able to stop Kevin's Dragon Crash, and he was also able to stop Base Sean. And prior to stopping the shots, obviously we can intel that he can react to both of the shots, and that's pretty much of his feats against a stronger Raimon. So who do
So,
you have top 20?
at top 20, I only have Jordan. All right, that's the only Gemini Storm player that I have on the list. Purely because I think every other player above him just has much better scaling, right?
Yeah.
So obviously I have Jordan as top 20 as the only Gemini Storm player because obviously it's very clear that he has the best inverse in his own team, right? He's the only one that actually has any decent solo AP feats, and he should be very high up. He should be top one in speed categories. That should easily put him above every other Gemini Storm player, right? And I have everyone else above him outside Gemini Storm. All right, so for
Yeah, and you
19th, I got Caleb, purely because obviously he shows up later in the series and he's also amped by the crystal, and he is seen to physically stalemate a post Gemini Storm Jude physically many times, as well as injure Kevin with a single tackle, and with a base shot he overpowers Mark with God Hand, albeit Mark was slightly injured from the previous Emperor Penguin number 1 shot, but he still ends up making, overpowering Mark in that regard with a minor injury. So yeah, that's it. Who do you have in 19?
uh I didn't include Caleb, so 19
Mm-hmm.
is Jordan again because he's the strongest in the Gemini Storm, so obviously he would be
Mm-hmm.
superior to the goalkeeper via slamming Tori and Zach's defensive Isatsus, and later on getting past Mark's Bakunetsu punch. So as you said before, he has decent AP, uh, also travel speed, reaction speed, and top 18. I have Samford, and if I was to include Caleb, I would say Samford above Caleb, at least in AP, because as we can see, he's able to overpower Mark's God God hand, and thus scoring a goal. And this is the same Mark that states that this was the first time he has seen a shot like that. So this would obviously bind the shots he has experienced from Jordan from Gemini Storm. And it was also stated by Jude that Mark wouldn't be able to get up if he tries to stop the shot twice. And again, Mark was able to consistently somewhat withstand shot from Gemini Storm. So that's why obviously I
Mm-hmm.
got Samford above Jordan and anyone from
All
Gemini
right.
Storm.
All right. Who do you have at 18th then, above Jordan?
But Jordan,
Yeah, above Jordan. Who you have above Jordan now?
so Samford top 18 and Jordan top 19. So Samford and
Okay.
then Mercury starting from Epsilon players.
Okay. So above Caleb that I have 19th, I put King. Um, Purely because he has Beast Fang, which is also is stated to be categorized the same as Emperor Penguin number one as a forbidden tactic, which obviously has a trade-off of being self-inflicting in terms of damage. However, it still has a trade-off of massive AP, and it was able to stop um, Emperor Penguin number two, which is ontologically just as strong as Emperor Penguin number one. And he is considered a major threat in Royal Academy Redux. He's one of the focal points, which narrative portrays him above the likes of Caleb, which would already establish to be, relative to and somewhat superior to majority of Raymond players post Gemini Storm, bar people like Sean, obviously. And then obviously above King, I have David. Um, it's even more simple. He overpowered Mark with Majin the Hand with improvement number one. He's treated as the major threat for the team, even by Caleb standards. Um, Mark barely extreme diff his shot, even with the help of Jude. Both getting injured in the process. So I think it's pretty clear that he should be on the top of the list in terms of that specific point in time. And I guess moving on from that, I'd skip a couple teams. I skip Sue's team,
Yeah. So
and I go straight to Soundtown. Right? I don't think he has any. Um, how do I say this? I don't think he has in particular amazing AP feats or any at all. However, I do think his reaction and combat speed is just kind of broken. Specifically paired with his intel, he can consistently not only other people, but also move on his own to dodge Satos from other players like Jax the Wall, Tori's the Tower, and I think that he should be able to somewhat beat everyone below him, not because of AP, but more like he would play the long game. I don't think
yeah,
there's any other player below him that could realistically tag him, right? I think, just his ability to read beats. I think he would just be able to dodge everything until exhaustion from other players and just beat the weakened version of themselves that way.
would you say that Samsung has better like endurance and stamina than those players who would
Yeah,
presumably make them, like, tired?
yeah, because even though endurance is classified as um, low level effort throughout long periods of time, he still inputted that same effort against a stronger opposition, which even though it's still low effort, it's still inherently slightly higher effort than the effort that he would have to input in regards to weaker players. So I think, yeah, I do think he has stronger endurance than anyone below him, which again allows him to play the long game and just beat other people to exhaustion. And I don't think anyone below him can tag him. So I think that's it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Fair points. I didn't include any team from when Raimon plays against those teams during friendly matches, and included Epsilon after Sanford. So top 17, top 16, and top 15. I've got Mercury, Zell, and Baling. So I only used the just like a few feats rather than every single feat. So I've
mhm,
used the one they have um when they are Epsilon plus. So Mercury has a feat at base and is like literally just slamming tourist tower. Um Top 16 I got Zell Blitzing, Hurley and Bobby at base. And Zell, apart from the other players, apart from Balin, he has a shot, an AP shot that can inflict damage as opposed to other players, and is shown to also play as a goalkeeper. And even though he doesn't stop Axel shots, he's able to at least react to it. So I would say that in terms of reaction and combat speed, it would be above uh of Mercury and the other midfielders that have like dribbling Isatus or like travel speed
Hmm.
base Isatus. Top 15 Balling, he's narratively superior to he's the strongest in his team. He's able to consistently stop shots from the likes of Sean, combine Isatus from Mark, Bobby, Eric, Sue, Tori, Jordan, Eric, Jordan, Eric, and he's consistently able to blitz past the defensive line, and he was able to overpower Mark's fist of justice.
Hmm.
So, do you have any
No,
reference?
not really. And then from 15 to all the way to 13, I have Mercury as well, and I have Zell, and then I have Dvalin. The reason why I was wondering, not wondering, I was a little bit skeptical on putting Mercury here because again, this is only 3 players per team. I was conflicted on Mercury or Metron, but I ended up with Mercury because Metron, even though he has um, Meteor Shower, quite literally just inflicts no damage at all to the Raymond players, to the point where Valen's, regular charge does inflicts infinitely more damage than it, so I don't think it's any substantial advantage. And he does get caught up, he does lose more duels based on reaction speed than Mercury than compared to Mercury, such as he not consistently, but he does, more often than not lose duels against people like Jude, which Mercury is obviously not shown to have such weakness, and she overall has better inverse as she's more consistent. So that's why I went over her. She also should have around the same exact AP as Mercury. No, as Metron, I mean. So yeah, that's why I chose her over Metron. And then obviously I went with Zell, basically the same reasoning that you gave. Um, he has obviously a solo AP shot that you can use to inflict damage on others, and he's still narratively top two in the team via his uh, role as substituting Dvalin whenever Dvalin cannot play in set position, right? If the major threat of the opposition team is the striker, then obviously Dvalin plays as goalkeeper, and Zell takes his role as striker, and then the situation reverses. So yeah, it does seem that um, Zell is indeed narratively top two in the team, with only behind Dvalin, which is pretty self-evident. He's physically superior to everyone below him. He has better feats physically in base than other people have with Hasatsus. He slams marks, fist justice relatively easily, consistently. Can injure players like 3 players at a time with it as well. So I think it's pretty self-evident why I put him at top of the list in that specific time period, right? And then after that, I have from 12 to 10, I have Neptune at 12. I put him above Droll, specifically because of the statement that he has of Gazelle actually acknowledging his brilliance. He actually says he's worthy of being in such a team, worthy of the title of Chaos, and actually just flat out complimented him why Gazelle has a prejudice against prominence players. And yet, that doesn't stop Gazelle from actually complimenting him, saying he's a good player. And then he just overall has better feats, such as obviously being able to break past Heaven's Time 2 out of 2 times, which was something that was in universe not considered to be something doable. Not at least at that time, right? No one can even believe, like no one even thought of the circumstance that Heaven's Time could be broken, yet he did it so consistently. And then he can easily outperform Droll, such as there's this specific regard, for example, he takes the ball from someone and then he goes to confront Mark, and then Mark literally cannot time his tackles properly. But then as soon as Droll comes along, Mark can actually succeed in doing the exact same thing. And then not Droll, Neptune can also fully react and perceive and actually understand how Hasasu's like flame dance work, and he can literally just dribble his way out of it. Um, and he is indeed the center of the playmaking of the team in general. Um, if I remember correctly, he also ended up just bulldozing his way through Jack using the wall as well. So I think he's overall not necessarily complete, more complete than Droll. I just think he's overall stronger and just has better raw physicals. So that's why I put him above Droll. And then I obviously have Gazelle and Torch over him. I have Torch above Gazelle simply because of the fact that while they are usually pretty relative, Torch still has the better feats. Gazelle still got stopped by a conceptual Megaton head, heavily incomplete, heavily unstable, while Mark did stop Torch's Atomic Flare with a finalized version of Mechaton Head, which is axiomatically above the incomplete version. But he still ended up getting knocked down to the ground and heavily in pain after doing so. And he can stop, and he can not stop. He can pierce right past a Darren's Majin the Hand and incomplete version of Mugen the Hand. So that's why I got him above Gazelle and in the 10th position. But what about you?
So from top 14 to top 11, I got Droll top 14, 13 Byron, 12 Gazelle, and 11 Torch. When I heard that your argument for Neptune, I might be able to swap uh Droll for Neptune. So the reason I had Droll top 14, probably relative or above Neptune, was probably because he was able to one shot Jack's the wall with his
Mm-hmm.
own it's dribbling Satsu. So even there was a dribbling Satsu, it it was also like AP based because of the
Mm-hmm.
attack. And if I'm not wrong, I think he also can replicate the defensive Satsu that both uh center backs
Yeah, he
had.
can. Yeah, he does have it. Yeah.
Um I don't know if he has any feats when during chaos, but he does have feats when he uses it against Diamond Dust. Um, and I think that's pretty much from Drive. Can't really remember any more feats that he has. I do remember that he has some decent blocks, so you could argue reaction speed. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
well, but again, I think I would change my mind and put Neptune instead of Droll because not just because of breaking Byron's Isatsu, but also being able to comprehend how playing dance worked and just like easily dribble
Right.
past Eric. Top 13 Byron. He's able to uh dribble past multiple players, including the defenders that were at the end overwhelming Byron. But when he uses Evans time, he obviously his attack speed will be above what they c- when they what they could react at the beginning. And also he has God knows, which is an AP shooting, so he can inflict damage to others. So he will be able to draw who only has inverse to Jack in terms of AP.
Mm-hmm.
And I placed Torch above Gazelle. Same reasoning. Torch being able to overwhelm Mark's Megaton, a completed version of Megaton head,
Yeah.
and its incomplete version was already able to stop Gazelle's shot. And during that match against Chaos, Mark had was the best player in terms of defensive 1v1 situations. And we can see that despite that, Torch is able to easily like react to Mark and dribble past him. So have reaction and combat speed Torch above Gazelle, but they would be
Mm-hmm.
relative in terms of travel speed. And
Mm-hmm.
then I just started with Genesis and Ramon players. So
Mm.
I'm done with Chaos players.
All right. Um, from ninth all the way to seventh, I have Bellatrix, Nero, and Zane. Um, obviously, I have Bellatrix since she's theoretically number two on the captaincy list for Genesis. Um, she obviously does scale above vast majority of the Raymond players up until the end of the match. And even though in the end of the match, he still outscales the majority of the Raymond players in all types of speed. Um, and she is part of, she should contribute logically up to a third, maybe a little bit higher, depending on how strong his her teammates are. But she still contributes at least around a third of the power of Supernova and Space Penguins, and she is highly relative to just flat out equal to people like Zine in terms of all types of speed. She is um, implied to be aware, not aware, somewhat competent in terms of tactical awareness and overall IQ, as well as just being part of Genesis, which is a title only given to the strongest of Alias Academy. So that should automatically already put her above everyone, in a lower rank in Elias Academy. So I think just the title itself should be more than enough, as well as just her overall contributions to it. And then I have Nero above Bellatrix purely because of a AP standpoint. He actually has individual AP feats such as in the first half of the match he pretty consistently eclipsed Axel, and then also relatively easily stopped Axel plus Mark's Megaton head. And then after Sean's awakening, he also fully stopped Legendary Wolf with Temporal Wall relatively easily as well. Um, and he should again massively, not massively, but considerably outscale all of his previous feats after he takes his limiter off. This is a well, it is a natural amp since it's a how do I say this? It's a mechanism that is not actually natural, despite what people think. It still pushes his body beyond his limits, which is why his organs are starting to implode. However, this obviously grants him a major buff over what he has already showed. So that's why I have him above Bellatrix, and then I have Zine above Nero. Maybe not in AP. However, I do have him. I think the conjunction of all the categories does put him above Nero. I don't think Nero could beat Zine in a conventional fight because, well, surely he could stop his attacks, well, initially at least. However, I really don't think that he could inflict said damage on Zine, specifically because the only way for him to do so would be waiting for a Zine to attack first and then using Temporal Wall to potentially reflect the shots back to him. Even then, the force carried out from that attack is not even greater. Even Zine himself was able to, even though it was a long distance, so power was lost over the distance. Zine was still able to control that pass and just use it to score with Supernova. So that's why I have Zine above Nero and Nero above Bellatrix because Bellatrix just does not have the same arguments as Zine. So that's why I have, Zine at seventh and then Nero at eighth and then Bellatrix at ninth. So what about you?
I've got from top 10 to top 7. Top 10 Wirtz, the other striker from Genesis. Top 9 Bellatrix. Top 8 Nero. Top 7 Savior. So top 10 Wirtz, No Limits should be narratively above anyone below Genesis purely because of the narrative and the title of Genesis. And also, he has feats such as, well, at the beginning, without the limit amp, he was able to beat past Tori and Eric. He's able to physically, um, I think, physically challenge Mark, and he was also able to overwhelm the defensive line and Darren with some base shots. Um, Top 9 Bellatrix, she would be above Wirt in terms of things like, I would say, endurance, purely because she's consistently in a duel versus against Mark, when she's both no limits and with limits. She's also has an element of narrative hype when um, uh, the dad or the coach, Sheila, um, tells Beatrix to take control of the team of a savior. So you could argue elements of leadership to Beatrix, and also, as like you said, she contributes at the very least a third of AP in Isatsu technique like Space Penguin and Supernova. Nero top 8, like you said, he's able to consistently stop Axel and Mark and also Sean in at the beginning, and he's also able to stop Sean uh, after he scores with uh, Wolf Legend. He's able to stop that shot with a new goalkeeper Isatsu, and then he can somewhat withstand Axel's emotional amped shooting Isatsu. And obviously, because he's able to stop these shots, he's also able to react to those shots. Top 7 savior, consistently overwhelming the defensive line and Darren with base shots better than Wirtz. And he's also the leader of Genesis narratively above anyone in that team. I'm just trying to say other arguments that you didn't say. Oh, also, well, Savior and Bellatrix are able to somewhat withstand the power of
Of the
the
Earth. Yeah.
Earth. Isatsu
Yeah.
shooting. I can't really say
Yeah.
any other arguments that you didn't say. So
I think, not for now. For fifth, fourth, and I'm gonna skip the top. I'm gonna skip, yeah, fourth, third, and second. I'm gonna only mention sixth, fifth, and one because I think that the fourth, third, and second are where the actual discussion should be. Because I think,
okay.
well, I have Sean at sixth, Axel at fifth, and then Mark at one. I have Axel above Sean, purely because of an AP standpoint, and I think there's relative in terms of reaction and combat speed. It's narratively portrayed that Axel's the best, not the best, is stronger than Sean AP wise because he broke past Nero's temporal wall after he took his limiters off, which is something that, well, Sean did not attempt, but we know previously that he did get stopped by base Nero with temporal wall after using Wolf Legend. But even though Sean should have higher travel speed, I still think there's nothing to entail that you could blitz Axel with said speed. I don't think there's nothing that could substantiate that claim. So I just have Axel slightly above Sean fighting wise, just because of an advantage in AP. And then obviously I have Mark at top one, simply because obviously he has the best AP overall, and he can, um, with time, as long as the match against Dark Empress goes on, he can react. He not can react, but he can better understand and somewhat perceive Nathan, who's narratively top one in speed in the season. So I think, and then he's obviously able to react to every single shot that comes his way, and then ultimately overpowers it pretty easily at the end. So I think that he should be top one again. I don't think anyone could blitz him, or, well, maybe someone such as Nathan could blitz him with Simpu Dash, but it does not inflict like any sort of damage. And then still the time to wind up an attack towards Mark from anyone, Shadow, Nathan, or Kevin, still, gives Mark an opening, a window to react, which I think he can easily take it, and then obviously stops the attack.
Uh,
So I assume you probably have somewhat, you know, I think you do have equal rankings for these three players. I just assume that you have Nathan, Kevin, and Shadow as different rankings as opposed to mine. Because I do have Nathan second, Kevin third, and Shadow fourth. So where do you have those players? Because I assume, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do
well,
assume that you have Sean, Axel, and Mark in the same positions as I have.
I think for me it would be interchangeable. I have Kevin top two purely because of individual AP. I consider Kevin to have better individual AP than Nathan, even though Nathan um is better in terms of all speed, but Kevin isn't far behind in terms of those speed
Mhm.
categories. And I don't think there's an argument that you could say that Nathan can blitz Kevin.
Mhm.
Because even if we talk about speed feats, let's say Nathan is able to blitz past Mark consistently. I think there's also a scene where Kevin, well, when he's talking with both Jack and Mark, I don't know whether Mark gets off guarded, but Kevin does blitz both of them at the end, and also I think physically somewhat inflict damage without any satsu,
Mhm.
so at base. So that's the reason why I have Kevin top two and Nathan top three. It might be interchangeable. It's
Yeah.
purely just because of the AP, and he isn't realistically he isn't really far behind in terms of all speed.
Mhm. Well, the reason why I have Nathan a second above Kevin and Shadow is purely because in a conventional fight between all of them, you could appeal to matchups, but even then, even if you appeal to that, I think every person besides Mark kind of suffers from this issue, which is, I don't think anyone could actually end up injuring, maybe not injuring, but even at all, like generally hitting Nathan unless he was exhausted. Because yes, both Shadow and Kevin do have, you know, comfortably better AP, right? Shadow, has worse AP than Kevin, yet he can pretty confidently like one shot people. He was able to overwhelm Scotty, Hurley, and Darren at the same time, and then had Sylvia actually shaking with fear. Everyone was like people like Coach Hillman, Celia, Nelly. Everyone was just completely scared of his power, and the coach for Dark Emperors was actually ecstatic. He was getting delirious just from the power that was being emitted, mostly from Shadow. However, in the case of Shadow, I really don't think he could hit it to Nathan. I think if he could hit it, it would be a very big hit. I think it would be devastating. However, I really don't think he could hit it specifically because Nathan can temporarily become intangible with his Satsu. And again, Nathan is no slack in terms of AP, right? While he is below them, he was still able to easily break through the wall. And then, even though Darren did somewhat comfortably stop the shot after it was somewhat weakened by the wall, he still noted that it was a real strong shot that actually inflicted some sort of sensation to his hands to the point where it's actually considerable with pain. So I do think there would be highly relative base to base to even Darren with Muganahan G5 or G4. Um, and I think he could more reliably hit that same shot, even though it's weaker than Kevin and Shadow's shot. I think it's more reasonable that he can consistently hit those shots rather than Kevin or Shadow actually being able to hit just once, right? You could always make the argument that Nathan would be tiring himself out faster than Shadow or Kevin. But even then, I still think that, you know, Nathan could outmaneuver them and just end up either just frustrating them to the point where they start wasting energy or just being really, it's like being extremely annoying, just being becoming intangible and then hitting them right off the bat with an attack that they can't really react to, or can only partially block, so they take some form of damage. So I think it's really just a matter of Nathan's intangibility just kind of wins them the fight in the long run. However, I don't think he wins 10 out of 10 times. I think he only wins like about 6 to potentially 7 at the most out of these fights, because I think it is very likely that Kevin and Shadow can indeed land a hit. Which, if they can land a hit, a clean hit, I think it's a matter of chaining attacks until Nathan cannot hold any longer. But even then, I still think Nathan's base AP is more than enough to inflict it, to take them down in the long run. Like I think
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
around 5 shots is a reasonable amount to take them down. So I think he can consistently hit 5 shots more than he can hit one or twice. That's why I have Nathan above them. Even though obviously
So
Kevin also has the advantage physically wise, not just shooting. But again, I think Nathan would just become intangible again if Kevin gets close. So I think I think Nathan just beats him more likely than not, more often than not. I mean,
I mean, I think if Nathan was to use, I don't know if you agree, but if he was to use like multiple defense,
mm,
obviously they would somewhat like struggle to know who the real Nathan is, and you could argue that they could get somewhat blitz, probably like off guarded
mm,
because they can't know who the real Nathan
yeah,
is, and just either just blitz them or just like use his base AP, which I agree. Even though Nathan's AP is below Shadow Kevin, it would still inflict at least s- a little bit of like pain. And if he does that consistently, because I do think that Nathan has more injuries than Kevin or Shadow because of his consistent duels against Raimon. So Nathan might succeed on the long run because we see, let's say, when the second half of the match started, I think uh, the entire team of Raymond got amped of because of Hillman saying some words about the plan
yeah,
to defeat Dark Emperors, and Nathan was still able to like read the situation and just literally just
yeah,
perception blades those players and steal the ball. So I think he could do the same against Kevin or Shadow. Only
yeah,
this time instead of using base form, he could use multiple defense to
yeah.
execute that
And
task.
even if those defenders are not necessarily physically um, imposing, or I don't know if imposing is the right word, if they're not a substantial advantage, I still think that Nathan could probably use them to interrupt the charge up of in Kevin's case. I think those clones can interrupt the charge of Wyvern Crash, and in Shadow's case, I think he can interrupt the process of Dark Tornado just to be a little bit annoying. Obviously, it does consume energy, but you can also inflict some for the damage and just overall nullify those attacks before it can be fired. So yeah, I think it's just really a battle of Nathan, being actually just full on annoying, not only in the sense that he can interrupt their attacks and become intangible, but those shots that he does manage to get off of and cleanly hit them do become not annoying that it's just a mildly inconvenience. It becomes annoying to the point where he is inflicting somewhat serious damage and there's nothing they can do about it. So I think that their cognitive abilities would deteriorate over time because of not mental conflict, but more like a emotional instability, which could indeed work against Nathan because they are possessing the alias rock, which does give a an overall amp. But again, I still think that it would the injuries that would sustain would outweigh the amps. So, and even then, most of those amps would be more AP related. It would boost their physical stats in terms of physical strength and AP more than it would speed. So the core issue would still remain. They would get stronger, but they wouldn't be able to utilize that strength. And I still think that more often than not they lose the fight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we would talk about Axel and Sean.
hmm Well, in terms of Sean and Axel, I really don't think they can. I don't. I really don't think they have a chance to beat anyone above them. I think at the
No, I
most
mean, as in,
maybe.
who's like stronger between
Well,
both? Because
yeah, I would say Axel is so much stronger than Sean. Again, I think relatively very relative in almost everything. Just Axel has an AP advantage. So again, maybe you can make an argument for Sean such that he could probably catch Axel in uh, ice ground or whatever it's called. But again, that does not by itself it does not inflict any damage. It just more just stuns them there. You could also argue that while he's stunned, he could potentially charge up Wolf Legend or Eternal Blizzard. But really, I really don't think he has enough time to fire that off. And Axel can very easily. He's very explosive in movements. I
Just
can just
yeah,
I think
jump.
he could just yeah
Yeah.
I think he just jump out of the way immediately. But yeah, maybe you can make an argument that Sean could beat Axel. Again, I don't necessarily oppose that. I could grant that. But I still don't think that. I think the opposite happens more often than not. I think they're relative. Again, if it turns to some close quarter combat, I think Axel, with his superior knowledge, he's very um, perceptive. He's very good at finding weaknesses. So I think he could potentially exploit any weakness he sees in close combat, or pick up on some not quirks, but like some ticks that Sean may have when he's about to do something. Kind of like the same way Eric did against that girl from Gemini Storm. I think again, if he goes a long way, I think Axel's IQ, superior intelligence would grant him the win. I think he could just find an opening to exploit and then just hit him with fireball storm, and he's gonna inflict great damages from one attack, and then it just takes he just takes that advantages and carries over to the end of the fight. Again, sure. Again, I don't mind saying that Sean could potentially beat Axel by using his higher versatility um, in terms of Asatsus. Again, I think Ice Ground can be really useful, specifically like especially if he does manage to stun Axel for longer than usual, and I think he could get a shot off. And again, I don't think that there's a huge gap in AP between them, so I do think Sean could realistically hurt him with one attack. Not as much as Axel would hurt him, but still considerably hurt him. So, but I would still likely give it's the slight edge to
Axel
Axel.
win.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
Axel. I mean, Sean. I think Axel is somewhat relative to. I would say relative to Sean in terms of travel speed. Saying this purely because of when they about to execute crossfire, you can see that they are both
yeah,
coordinating in terms of travel speed. But I don't know if that's Sean, just like slowing down
yeah.
because
It
of
could be.
Axel's
Yeah,
speed, or
yeah. It could be that he's
Axel
slow.
actually trying to be relative to him in terms of speed. And
Yeah,
also
I would.
there
Yeah,
are situations like in Genesis when Sean blitzes two center backs
yeah,
when Axel passes the ball to Sean and then Sean blitzes. You can see that Axel can somewhat keep up with him in speed. So I
yeah,
don't think Sean that has blitzing Axel as a win con because
yeah,
he's relative to him.
yeah. Yeah. Again, I really I have the same position. I don't think he could blitz Axel. But yeah, I would still give Sean the slight edge in terms of travel speed, because while Axel is somewhat shown to be relative, or at least have an equal like conservative speed, I don't think Sean has a higher top speed. He can have that little burst in movement that he showed against those center backs. Even though Axel had just caught up to him, he instantly created like around like 1 to 2 meters of distance just from that short burst. So I do think Sean is a little bit faster, but I really don't think it matters, because I think that Axel's reaction and combat scales to Sean's movement speed, so I don't think he gets blitzed in any way. So again, I think Sean's real win con could be his defensive Asatsu ice ground, if he can lock, just entrap Axel for long enough to get a shot off. If he can't, I really don't see him having any win con, right? I think Axel's win cons would probably just be being able to land Fireball Storm and then take that advantage from there, or just I don't know, try to use his overall intelligence and perceptive analysis to try to deduce any form of weaknesses that Sean might have, such as a tick, a quirk, a habit, something that could, like an overall weakness. I don't know. I think you could be able. That could be a possibility. I don't think it's very likely, but I think it is a possibility. So I think Axel has more reliable win cons than Sean. So that's why I have him slightly above. And then I have obviously all those Dark Empress players aforementioned above them, and then Mark just top one, by far.
And even though we could grant Sean inflicting damage to Axel, I don't think it would be that much significant because I think Axel has more durability than Sean. Even though Sean has that feat against Kevin when he's
Yeah.
somewhat stalemating him, that situation is I think is underpinned under two factors. The first factor is literally Kevin is implied to be holding back until they are like tied 2-2. And the second factor was literally, well, in the English dub about the injury in his leg. So
Yeah,
that
yeah, he was injured with his
that
ankle. Yeah,
really downscales Sean's durability
and
feat.
that's why. Yeah,
Whereas, yeah,
yeah. Go on, go on, go on.
yeah. Whereas with Axel, you could extrapolate his durability through his shooting, striking against Nero.
Yeah. Do you have any other notes, or do you think we could end the recording?
No, I don't have any notes. The only notes I had was from top 20 to top 16. Everything was improvised.
Yeah,
Or you already said the arguments, so I just
yeah,
didn't know what to
yeah.
say.
Essentially, yeah. I think I'm going to end the recording then. All right.